Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
She's pretty amazing in what she does. She is a heyoka, which is a storyteller. She tells stories, but somehow woven into that is a message of healing or awareness or insight for all of us. She's also an intuitive, an empath, and a coach of sorts to help navigate through life. And she's back with us. Who knows what she's going to say? Janis rejoins us. Welcome back, Janis. How are you?
Hi, Steve. I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good though. It's a beautiful day here on the mountaintop. The birds actually woke up this morning going, "Why am I singing?" It's just really pretty. The leaves have about finished doing the main change though, so it's starting to settle down. Some limbs are going bare. I went out to clear out some field yesterday and somehow woke up this morning with a little thorn sticking out of the bridge of my right here. It was like a little hairpin, like a needle sticking straight out, like it had grown from my face out. Strange and peculiar. I look like a little tiny rhinoceros with this little one. I had taken a shower last night, washed my face, slept all over it. Did it this morning and put my glasses on, and it was right under the bridge of my glasses. And I thought, well, this is going to be a weird day.
Well, maybe it's the beginning of a unicorn. Some say you are a unicorn, that there's nothing like you, and maybe that is the beginning. I don't know.
I've been called a lot of things, but like, the unicorn. No, they don't sparkle when they poof.
So you've told us many stories that had a connection to a message, healing. Anything stand out in your mind, like a story of healing that had an impact on somebody's life? Something that really connects, where you had a story or some deep insight, and then it helped somebody in some way. Anything specific stand out in your mind?
Yes. It was. Gosh, I've talked to so many people from then to now, but then when I was still debating if I was really seeing things or if I was just making up and I had an odd imagination, because you never can tell about yourself. Other people can, but it's hard to see yourself. I had been doing readings. I'd been telling people stories about themselves since I was old enough to talk sensibly and you could understand what I was saying. Before that, I was doing it. People just couldn't understand, blah, 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 blah. But a lady in the Mediterranean asked me, she came over to my house one evening and she banged on the door. She didn't knock. I mean, she was bang on the door. And she comes in and she's like very small. She makes me look like a giant American, and I'm no longer 5 feet tall. But she comes into the room and she says, look and see for me. See what you can see for me. And that's all she said. She came in, put herself down in the kitchen chair and waited. And so, I had nothing to do but to do what she told me, because that's the kind of girl I am. But it was so bizarre because when I sat down to look at her to figure out what she wanted, an oval opened up above her head, like a movie screen, but instead of being oblong, it was an oval. And it had the little frillies around it, like an old-fashioned cartoon. And in it was a strong wind. The wind was blowing the sand out, and it was hitting me in the teeth and got in my mouth and in my eyes. The wind was blowing from this image of this oval screen in front of me. When the wind finally died down, I could see a man and this woman, and they were in a situation and some stuff happened, and that's all I'll say about that. And so I'm telling her what I'm looking at, because I don't know what else to do. I'm just telling her what I see, because it's over her head, like one of those quick quotes things, images. She can't see it, so I'm telling her what I'm looking at. And finally, it comes to a close, And the whole oval just kind of like vacuumed itself back shut again and it went away. For myself, I was kind of mesmerized. That was pretty cool, to see, have it presented, to have the image actually, put into its own little stage so that I could see it as a presentation. This woman was so organized, you wouldn't believe it. In hindsight, that's probably why it was so well done. Turns out she had recently met a young man, and there were these weird dreams coming out of this guy, and she'd look at him out of this corner of her eye and she'd see some stuff that no married woman should see about a strange young man she'd just met. And she wanted to know who this young man was. As I told her the image, I didn't know any of this. She just sat down in the kitchen and said, "Tell me what you see." So I told her what I saw. When I was done, she's reaching for Kleenex and blowing her nose and wiping her eyes. She says, "Well, now I know." I said, "Now what do you know?" She said, "Who the man is." I said, "Oh my God, it's your husband." She said, "No, it's not my husband." Said, "Holy cow, who did I just see?" And so she filled me in on the dream she had been having about this guy she had just met that correlated exactly to the image I was seeing over her head, except that her information was coming from present day. And I had picked up a scene that looked like something out of Lawrence of Arabia. I was in sand dunes at an oasis with tents and camels and guys in long, everybody wore robes, and it was just in another time experience. But the experience that was happening in this vision, she recognized as a repetition of what she had just endured, trying to sleep last night, and what she had imagined when she first met this guy. Once she realized that it was not a middle-aged woman lusting after some young hunk, but it was more likely to be a memory of some young hunk, she relaxed. I mean, she couldn't even look at her husband in the face straight. She was so embarrassed because of what happened when she looked at this guy. But once she saw the history of it and put it together, she realized she was just, being a middle-aged woman, being embarrassed, because once upon a time she was not middle-aged. And the feelings, the memories, everything washed over her. She thought she was just never going to look at another guy but her husband. Only I guess she said that out loud because this character showed up. So that was a lot of fun for me, as well as educational for both of us. Every time I see someone's history like that in that kind of setting, very often I'll learn some kind of actual history because of the time period, because of the way a person is dressed. Someone can identify that particular, where that came from, where that image might have first originated. So it's helpful to other people, and it's really interesting to me because I like the little history notes.
How did you pull that out?
I just saw it. I saw it. I have always been a seer. When I was a little girl, mid to late 50s, there weren't a lot of words to describe a little child like me. Crazy was usually, just a little bit nuts. Everybody's always keeping an eye out for me because I'd wander off in my own little world. Seeing things. When my mom figured out what I was doing, she'd sneak off and ask me what I had seen to see if it matched up with what she had seen. So it's just kind of like a little family inheritance.
And you see symbol signs when you're doing a reading? And do you always have a story connected to a, if you will, call it a reading?
Well, the readings turn out to be stories. That's really how I see it. The kind of story, a lot of times it looks like a movie, like I've looked in on a movie trailer. I've looked in and read someone's diary, or I've, like in the desert scene, I got hit in the face with sand to find out that I was in a sand dune experience, but I got hit in the face with sand in my kitchen while I was looking at the screen. I could smell camel dung. It was weird because the other senses came through the screen. So sometimes I surprise myself with how immersed I am. But telling it as a story seems to be the sanest way to explain what I see.
I guess there are some people who, let's say, are medium psychics, and they might have a message from the other side or some insight, if you will. You know, a psychic is said to tell you the future. A medium actually connects with the other side. You, it seems, it comes in the shape of a story.
It does, like almost like a memory sometimes.
Hmm.
I'll remember. Yeah, it's a lot like a memory. And I don't know where I would have such a memory from.
Do you have to intentionally turn it on? Like, are you walking in a grocery store and picking up things from people, and call it a movie plays in your head for a quick second? In this situation, it was, Arabian Nights, so to speak. Would you walk into a grocery store and see somebody, and all of a sudden you're focusing on, somebody from colonial times? Why am I getting that? Or do you have to physically say, okay, what's the story? What's the story with this person that's before me that I'm going to read?
Well, usually I bump into things, whether I want to or not. Um, when I'm out doing day-to-day stuff, I tend to kind of work in my own little space, my 12 inches of personal space. Usually I can get through with my shopping that way, and that'd be fine. A lot of times, though, especially if I'm really determined to just stay to the shopping list, don't buy candy, don't look up from the list. If I get hit with something, a young woman one time came by, had my hair down, and she just followed me around the store flipping with my hair. Well, my hair was down past my knees at the time. I shouldn't have worn it out like that in public. And I got frustrated when I realized she was trying to have a healing, and she had reached out for my hair. That's where my electricity comes through. It screwed with my head, but it balanced something in her. It gave her peace. She was calmer. Once we finally got her to let go, she was much calmer, more centered. Her voice was smoother. She did have a little bit of a problem. She was being assisted in her shopping with someone, but she grabbed my hair. Not the first person to come up and grab my hair, which is why I usually don't wear it down. But when I do, and something like that happens, that's when I realize, well, that's why I had it down. That must have been why I left it down, because so that somebody needed to touch on it. Somebody needed to grab me by the hair. And I have to deal with that because I work 24/7. I don't have any moments off.
Wow.
I'm always on, kind of in that way.
Yeah, I've heard lots of stories you tell, but never learned the process here. Now, the symbols came out before about Arabian connection. What are some of the other symbols, thoughts, things that have presented themselves when you're doing a reading in the form of a story for somebody?
Not for someone else.
Yeah.
I will see them in other clothing, in period clothing. I will see their ancestors who always show up in period clothing, whether the person I'm working with is or not. And that gives me information then that goes into the story. The entity, the life force that reaches to talk with me from what other side means, has a reason for it. There's way too many things to do over there than to just hang out and gossip over the fence with me. I don't like it. It gets us nowhere. It irritates me, so we don't do that.
Hmm.
But I'm available. I mean, I'm on the bulletin board at the back of the laundromat over there. My picture says, "Come get Janis if you need help," because I'm open 24/7, and it's I have found a way to feel respected. I had a meltdown dealing with some Vietnam veterans. It was my meltdown, not theirs. I'm empathic, so I was already wading through theirs. But the images that I began to see were just too emotional for me to deal with physically. My body couldn't take what I was looking at as they told me their stories, their memories of the war. And I had a hard, long discussion. I get out there. Sometimes I reach my limit and I go shake my fist at God and say, "Are you listening? I need this. If you want me to do what you want me to do, I need this." And what I needed was no visuals on that stuff. I mean, let me hear them, let me help them, let me do what I can, but I don't want to see. I don't want to see those images. They take me off track. They're just distracting, and they serve no purpose but to upset me. So I've asked for that concession, and I haven't seen any gore since then.
Do you feel that you have spirit guides? A lot of people who do readings say that there are spirits around them that kind of give them the insight, the messages. Do you have something like that?
Yeah, yeah. I have a little ball of light. It's been with me since I was in the crib. I have memories of playing with it. I couldn't sit up yet in my crib. I was really young. But this little ball of light, it would like come in and out of the air. It may have, looking back, it might be fun to say it was crossing dimensions and I would see it pop in and out. But it was just my little friend. We played. It helped get me in trouble, helped try to keep me out of trouble. You know, um, my little playmate, and it still is here with me. Travels with me, comes with me. I heard some other people describe them as friends. My friends are with me. My guides are with me. I think of it kind of like Spanky and the gang. I have. I'm never alone.
Well, who
I've
are
never
they?
felt alone.
Who, could you name them? Do you see them? Do you just sense them? You just know they're always around.
I've really thought hard about that question. You'd be surprised because I've had the good luck to hang out with scientists who do scientific experiments. And to make it scientific, you have to be able to calculate and recalculate every single spot on the gauge. Otherwise, it's woo woo. So I've learned to think about what I do in non woo woo terms. How do I do this? It gets into a long, deep discussion, but it seems to have to do with radio waves, photosynthesis waves. These things carry information. Sunlight carries information, osmosis. The plants, the leaves turn over, different chemical reactions happen. As the air and the light hits, different chemical reactions happen. I have grown to think that all creatures have this aspect. Humans have blocked it out because we are just dealing with so many things on our handsets and we can't dare look up because we might miss something about Taylor Swift. But we all have these abilities, but they've been pushed aside, ignored, gone into dormancy, sort of like an appendix or tonsils. Every once in a while they'll give you trouble and they'll act up and you'll notice them, but mostly we don't notice it. So for whatever reason, I've just always been a part of that sense That's why I was the crybaby, why I was the silly one, the weird one, the one that would wander off, because I would follow the spirit of a thing to discover I didn't know where I was anymore and I was lost. Visitations from people from the back behind the cornfield when I was about 3. Different dreams that have repeated themselves over the years. The same location, but it's a different scene with the different dreams. I've never not had a connection with the more imaginative, visually stimulating side of my brain. And I can't really tell you if it's something I'm making up, but I really feel like it's in response to literally what's in the air around me, what's circulating around me.
Where would it come from? That's my thought. It's,
Breath.
you
It would
know,
be the breath.
anybody can just make stuff up, but you're very specific, and there are messages in what you say, and we've
Mhm.
seen that. We've had people write in, we've had people call in. Um, I don't know how you do it, but it's interesting, and I don't mean this in a negative way, and entertaining, even for
Good,
somebody you're reading.
good.
That it's woven in an interesting story. We all love stories. We all have a story. We've been hearing stories since babies. Our parents would read us a bedtime story. So your messages of healing come in the form of a story, which is profoundly interesting. It's very different. A
Well,
medium
yeah.
psychic can just say, "Hey, I'm getting this," and that's fine too.
Have you ever seen a chemical equation where all the brainiacs put these letters and strange shapes and they mountain climb them up and down across with the plus and the minuses and the parentheses and all that stuff?
Sure.
That's a story.
Fair enough.
You have to know that language to read that story, but it's a story. 1 + 1 = 2. That's a story. Just
I
waiting to
I agree.
build in weird things. Like you say, story is like that's how we exchange information, how we double check that it means what we think it means, because it comes with a story, and that make like double says whatever the message is. It's a great way to communicate. It is honest generally. Um, it leaves room for doubt,
Hmm.
especially when I was growing up. You always had to. There was always room for doubt. Um, but that makes the brain search and look to find out instead of being casual observer from the side. The brain kicks in with a story. If it was a formula or a recipe, or just facts and figures, the brain just might turn it off. But if it's a story, don't you want to find out what happens next?
Sure. And you're more engaged. You're more engaged in it. It's a difference between watching a movie, which is a story, or just somebody jotting a couple of facts down and handing it to you. Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the story makes more sense than the random facts that somebody might give you.
And stories too, you might pick up something that really you're the only one that got that connection because you're the only one that had that comic book when you were 10 years old and remembers that line. There's facts and figures gives you facts and figures, but a story gives you room to expand and project and pontificate.
See, that's a deep word for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was one we as children. My dad, he really was the son of a what do you call a dirt farmer? Anyway, he was a dirt farmer. I'll think of it in a minute. But they were really poor people. So when his brothers and sisters all decided that the littlest baby should go to school and finish high school, he was outnumbered. He had to go. But he learned all these cool words. So when we kids came along, he had to have a reason to use them.
Well, I know what it means. I haven't heard that one in forever.
Oh my gosh. Oh my. Sometimes it would make him laugh and laugh until his latissibles would flap. That was another good word. When I was 3, he had to explain to me that the reason I could not drive my tricycle off the porch, down the sidewalk, down the driveway through the air, around that tree and into the barn was because my trajectory was off. I was 3.
Wow. Maybe this is
Tricycle.
what
Yeah, I didn't buy it when he said tricycles don't fly. I didn't believe that. But the trajectory, he had me there. I just.
maybe that's what's inspiring you to do what you do. Maybe the beginning there of these big words, if you will, that came from maybe your father, and maybe it was that that kind of pushed you into storytelling.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He grew up really poor, and through the war, he was a depression. Was born in 1930, so he was a depression baby. He grew up the baby of 8 or 9 kids. There was 20 years between him and his oldest sister. So they,
Hmm.
the oldest was raising the youngest. His dad died out in the field pushing the hoe, the plow, while a mule pulled it at the other end. He had made a deal with God, apparently, the story went to me, that his kids would be taken care of as long as they never forgot the Lord.
Hmm.
So most
Interesting.
of us did pretty good. I always took that as something brilliant. I mean, as a little kid, I heard all sorts of things. I mean, we didn't rent this one house because of the giraffes. I thought there were giraffes in that house for years before I figured out they said drafts, not giraffes. But my
Well,
parents let me think it was giraffes.
we could probably fill a whole podcast with what you think. I thought the glove compartment was a glove department.
Oh, and the butter
Uh,
bins. Mm-hmm.
it was a
And
bunch of
there's the
them.
butter bins, yeah. But my parents were smart enough to let us kids learn and develop at our own rate, and they'd encourage us to be just a little bit smarter. No matter how smart we were, we could be a little bit smarter, if we pay better attention.
Mm.
Probably child abuse, but it,
How do we find you? Somebody's looking for a story. What's the story? How do we find you?
oh, you can just find me on Facebook. That one's really easy because I'm Janis Reed. I'm the goddess in training. Or you can find me on my email site. It's a Janis Reed 2 at outlook.com. Janis. I am Jan is. I'm not Janice. I ain't that sweet. Janis Goddess, the number 2 at outlook.com. See, I'm the second born. I've always been number 2. It's just going to be the bane of my life.
Who wants to be number one? Is too much work involved. There's
Oh,
those
but to be
expectations.
but when your father calls out over a crowd, hey, number 2, and everybody looks at you.
Well, I guess it's even worse if lots of people look at the same time.
No, it was. It was. I mean, no, let's change that subject.
Great talking with you. I love the insight and we've talked quite a few times, but never knew the process how the story gets put together. But now I got it. It's a now the story's clear, and for that I thank you. Thank you for being here.
Are the rains gone? Can you see clearly now?
It's about to rain here in New York.
Oh, lucky you. All right.
Yeah, and there's
Well,
probably a story involved in that too. But
oh, yes. Another
we'll,
time. There's another story there. Another time.
we'll talk next time.
Enjoy the weekend. Wade, enjoy the week.
You too. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.